Queen's University Scientista aims to promote the advancement of undergraduate and graduate women in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. Our purpose is to provide women in science with the resources and support necessary to help them succeed in their current and future endeavors. My name is Danielle.
And I'm Sarah. In today's live episode of Women in Scientista, we are here with Victoria and Cassandra, our very own grad reps, to discuss their experiences in STEM. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us today, guys.
Okay, if you're all set, we'll jump right into it. To begin, we'll kick things off with a bit of an icebreaker. These past few months have definitely been different than what we're used to. What have you done to remain sane during quarantine?
Well, thankfully, grad classes are still taking place in person for the most part. But I found even over the summer during the bulk of the pandemic, changing scenery is really good, really enjoying the weather that we have while we have it before winter kind of kicks off. Studying in cafes when possible, studying in the park, going on walks, and also just scheduling things to look forward to. I know my housemates and I kind of recreated stages just in our living room one night, so that was really fun. And it kind of just gets you through the week knowing that you have something fun to look forward to on the weekend.
Yeah, mine's similar to Victoria. I'm doing classes in person, so I'm pretty busy with schoolwork right now, but over the summer I took up painting, so I've kind of been keeping up with that a little bit, and then just trying to get outside as much as possible while the weather's still nice.
That sounds amazing. Could you both please describe what program you're currently in, as well as what program you did your undergraduate degree in?
Yeah, so I have a Bachelor of Science honors and I did a major in life science. So for those who don't really know, a life science major is pretty much like a pre-med program at Queen's. And because I was in a major and not a specialization, I kind of got to tailor my last 2 years to myself. I got to choose pretty much all of my courses after I finished my second year requirements. And then other than that, I kind of just spent my time. I TA'd a lot. I really enjoyed teaching. And I spent some time in extracurriculars like Scientista. I've been involved with Scientista for many years now, and I absolutely love it. I think it's taught me a lot, and I value mentorship so much because of it and initiatives like this. So good on you ladies for keeping it up. And I was the type of student that kind of tried to avoid research at all costs. So if you're out there and you feel like that, you're definitely not alone. And I'll give you guys a little bit of insight into what I did to mitigate that for myself. But right now, I'm pursuing a master's in anatomical sciences, and I'm in the Pattern 2 program. So this is a little bit different from the traditional Pattern 1 program, which is research-based, whereas the Pattern 2 program is course-based. So my program has 3 key pillars, and those are anatomy, teaching, and research. So we do get a little bit of research in our program. We get to do a mini thesis, but the bulk of my program, I'm learning anatomy. I get to do a full cadaver dissection. We have some practicums and observerships at the hospital with the surgical department, as well as the autopsyist at KGH, which is really cool. My program is 16 months long, as opposed to the traditional 2-year program. And we get 2 weeks off in December and 2 weeks off in July. So a little different from undergrad when we get those full summers off. That's no longer usually the case in a master's program. Another cool thing about my program is that we share 3 of our courses with the upper year undergrads. And you're eligible to be exempt from those courses if you've taken them in your undergrad. So I just thought I'd throw that in there for anyone kind of looking into anatomical sciences. It's kind of difficult to distinguish sometimes what P2 even means because it's so unique to Queen's, but I'll let Cassandra go ahead with her explanation.
Thanks, Victoria. I was also in life sciences here at Queen's, except I was in the specialization stream of it. So I did do a 4th year research project, and until fourth year, most of my courses were kind of laid out for me. I only had, I think, one elective each semester in third year. And then in fourth year, you do have more electives, but you kind of tailor your courses to the research project that you're doing. So your supervisor that you have kind of suggests courses, and obviously they're not mandatory, but it did help out with the project that I did. So my project was in reproduction and development for my fourth year research project. And that was kind of where I thought that I fell in love with research and figured, yeah, this is something that I could continue doing for a little bit. So now I'm in a master's, which is a research-based program, and the program I'm in is called Translational Medicine. So like Victoria mentioned, mine is the more typical research-based master's program. It's 2 years. The first two semesters, so for fall and winter, we have a mix of courses and lab work. With COVID, it's a bit more course heavy just because we haven't gotten in as much, but that is what it is. And then for the summer and the following semesters, it's just research based. So you're kind of working towards your project and working towards your thesis. So it is 2 years, and yeah, we get a couple weeks off for Christmas and again in the summer, but other than that, it's pretty much full year.
That's awesome. And what does the day-to-day life look like for both of you in your programs?
Yeah, so right now in my program, I'm completing the bulk of my courses in this first kind of fall semester. So I'm in 2 out of those 3 courses that I mentioned that we share with the undergrads, as well as some other graduate courses. So I'm learning a ton of anatomy right now. I'm in the lab a lot, kind of typical day-to-day, just going to class, studying. But we're also in a really interesting course called micro teaching. So one of my assignments just recently was to teach a topic in anatomy in 3 minutes. So that was really interesting. But other than that, right now my day-to-day is pretty similar to undergrad, but I'm looking forward to next semester when I'll have a little bit less courses and I'll be able to dive into my research a little bit more.
Mine is pretty similar. So I've started going into the lab more frequently now just with my experiments. So I usually spend every day at the lab, at least for part of the day. I'll go for the morning, let's say, and then come home and do the remainder of my work from my room. I have 3 classes a week, so just 2-hour classes. Usually they're in person. Sometimes we'll have a guest lecture coming in and it's on Zoom, and I'll do it remotely, but usually I'll go to campus, go to class for a little bit, go to the lab, do the work that I need to do at the lab, come home, and then finish up doing some readings, looking over papers, working on assignments from home. One thing that's kind of interesting about doing a master's, and this is kind of specific to my project, but there are times that I have to go in on the weekend just to kind of check something out. It's never for very long. Like I went in today for 30 minutes, but because you do have your own research project, if there's something that needs to be checked or needs to be changed into something else, you are responsible. So you may have to go in on weekends depending on what your program is.
And just out of curiosity, what inspired you to pursue STEM in the first place? And how did this impact your decision on your current program?
So my answer is going to be really simple for this one. I always just was super fascinated with the human body. I wanted to be in bio classes like when I was in high school, and I looked forward to that section where we just learn about physiology and anatomy. And that was kind of the case in the undergrad program that I was in as well. I kind of always looked forward to my second year physiology class, and I took anatomy even though I didn't have to in my major program. So yeah, I think that just kind of led me really naturally into anatomy, and I'm really happy with it so far. It is really interesting, and I think it gives you such a great picture as a whole of the human body, and I highly encourage that like everyone who's in the medical field at least know a bit about anatomy. I think it's so important to see kind of the bigger picture of things, for sure.
Mine is kind of similar to Victoria. Again, in high school, I started taking biology, chemistry, and all the sciences, and I just kind of never looked back. I liked the courses, so I continued to take them. I went to undergrad, I continued to take them and never really looked back, just kind of built upon the differences within biology and within the human body and kind of seeing all that there is going on. And that just kind of like led me to take new courses to learn more, and just honestly just following my interests and keeping what I'm interested in learning in.
It's so great to hear about where your interest in STEM started. Our listeners and exec team also sent in a few questions regarding your experience in grad school so far. So building off your interest, how and why did you decide to go to grad school?
Yeah, so I kind of came into my undergrad, I guess, like a lot of life science students, just trying to find the fastest way to get to medical school. But after my third year, I think I kind of had an aha moment. At that point, I was choosing all of my courses, and I was kind of able to really see what I was interested in, and make my degree very niche to my interests. So I was introduced to so many different paths at that point that I could take. It kind of took the pressure off. And I could see that, you know, no matter where I ended up, I would be happy and successful and find something that was well suited to my goals. So that was really reassuring. But the decision to kind of go to grad school kind of came from a lot of, you know, thought and conversations with family and friends who had also pursued STEM degrees, and had suggested that just having a master's in science really makes you eligible for a lot more jobs in the field. So I would suggest for anyone considering it to kind of weigh out what benefits it's going to provide you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on for sure as well.
Yeah, for me, throughout undergrad, I always knew that that wasn't going to be it for my schooling. I was going to continue on with something. I was very undecided as to what that was. Like Victoria, I am also interested in medical school, but I didn't apply after fourth year. I just didn't think it was the right time for me to apply. And so I was kind of looking around for what else there was for me. And so I fell upon this, well, actually in my fourth year doing my research project, I realized that I did like research because that was my first major experience with it. So it was something that I was like, okay, I could continue on with 2 more years, see how it goes when I have more of an independent role with my project. So I started looking into different research projects that they had, and for like thesis-based master's programs. And I found the one that I'm currently in, translational medicine. And I really like this program because it's very broad in the sense that it doesn't close any doors for you. What you have after you graduate from it, you can go to med school, you could continue to do a PhD, you could make a full switch if you wanted, and I could probably go into like computing and do school that way if I really wanted to. So it just doesn't really close any doors, and it just gives me the chance to continue to learn and to continue to grow with whatever experiences I want, while also helping me become a better candidate and move down the path to whatever I end up doing in the future.
I love how both of you talked about sort of the process of self-discovery during university. I feel like a lot of people, when they leave high school and go into university, they have an idea of what they want to do when they get out, whether that's med school or whatever it is. But I love how you both talked about how along the way you discovered a passion for something that was different, and like Cassandra being research, and Victoria talking about your passion for teaching, and I think that's really incredible. So along with that, do you have any advice on how to know if grad school is actually right for you rather than just an expectation for science majors after graduating?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the first thing that I'll say is, like, I've noticed a lot of STEM students, including myself, are just very type A. And I think we all just need to remember that, you know, in most cases, nobody is expecting anything from us. We put like all of that pressure on ourselves. So my advice is to just kind of consider what you want your ideal life to look like, not just within the span of 2 or 3 years, but really a big picture of your whole life. Try and like map that out on a piece of paper. And this is kind of going to force you to think not only about whether a master's is going to help you reach your career goals, but also about whether it's going to like align with the kind of life that you want to live, and as well as your other goals and your other timelines. So this can be like a long process kind of just reflecting on what your passions are and what makes you happy, but it's really, really worth it in the end. And it definitely leads to the best decision making. I had a career counselor kind of suggest that I do this, and I was skeptical at first, but I don't know where I would be if I hadn't really done that and taken that time to reflect. I think we think so much about the now and we worry so much about the future that we don't really consider whether like we're happy sometimes, and we don't really consider all of our other goals in life rather than just our career, right? Our career is not everything. It's a very small portion of our life. Um, but yeah, like any other decision, I suggest just weigh out the pros and cons, and also consider what the benefit is going to be to you of having a grad school degree.
Yeah, one thing that I would say is if you're unsure about anything and if it's your decision to go to grad school, ask questions. Reach out to supervisors, reach out to current students, reach out to friends, and just ask them what they know about grad school, what they think about it. I can say honestly, a year ago today, I was starting to work on my applications for grad school, and I still didn't really know much of what I was getting into. I knew I was interested, but I didn't know what my day-to-day life would be. I didn't know what my project would be. So just it's important to like find those people, to reach out, ask questions, to learn more about it, because it's hard. And like there's information online that you can find, but there's nothing like actually sitting down with someone and asking them for their experiences. You'll get so much more out of that. And then my other advice for that is just take a deep look at what you want out of your master's program, and like whether that be a master's or a professional program, but think about why you're going into it. Are you going into it because everyone does a master's and it's expected of you? Or are you going into it because it's something that you're interested in and you see yourself growing as a person from this experience, and it will make you better for your future down the road? And just kind of think like, what do you want out of it, and why is this a good fit for you?
I know right now, being in third year, I'm definitely overwhelmed about next steps, whether that be med school, grad school, or like even PA school. I'm just wondering, how did you narrow down your program of choice since there's so many to choose from, and what makes your program unique?
So hopefully Cassandra and I will provide kind of a balanced answer to this question. But for me, I found that just due to me trying to avoid research kind of at all costs, that already really narrowed down my choices, to be honest. I knew that I was looking for like a more professional master's degree. And for those just listening, I'm using air quotes around the word professional because that's kind of just what they call degrees that are not like research based. These tend to be more course based, and they're a little bit more practical in that like they train you for a specific job. So I knew that I was looking for that, but after that, it kind of just led to me going with my gut. Um, I think looking at program prerequisites can be a really good indicator if you're struggling with this decision. Definitely, don't go into something that's based on like a bunch of prerequisites that you hated in your undergrad. So definitely take a look at those. That can help a lot to narrow down your decision. And then just try and get into contact with students, just like Cassandra said. They're eager to help, and they can really give you a really good sense of what it's like. And the fact that my program was just so unique made my decision a lot easier as well. And the fact that I went to Queens for my undergrad, also just there were no surprises there. It's not like I was moving across the country. I kind of already knew what I was getting into. Um, but I had already been kind of lucky in the sense that I was exposed to a lot of alumni that graduated from my master's program. My program has a really huge emphasis in teaching, as I've mentioned. So, a lot of my lecturers throughout my undergrad classes in anatomy were students in the program. So I was able to approach them easily after class and ask them questions. I also knew a lot of the profs that run my program. So I had a lot of conversations with them. But yeah, like I said, my program's really unique in that sense, and it places a lot of emphasis on teaching and facilitation. And that's something that I immersed myself in undergrad, and I knew that I liked. So from there, I think the decision was just like a no-brainer.
Yeah, one thing I kind of want to touch upon is, Danielle, you mentioned that you're in third year and you're a little worried because you're not too sure what you want to do. And I would say try not to stress about that at all, because I honestly am still in the same boat. I don't know what I want to do. I'm just going day to day and hoping it works out. But the thing is, there's no one path to becoming a doctor. There's no one path to becoming an anatomy professor. There's no one path to becoming a basic scientist, and everyone has their own way. And if it's something you want to do, you'll find your way there eventually. So just try. It's hard to do, but try not to stress about that and keep that in mind. But I think my indecisiveness of what I wanted to do kind of led me to my program, because my program is unique in that it really does combine research with like the basis of clinical medicine and kind of learning about that. So I've talked a bit about the research component of my project, but for like the more medical aspect of it, we have our courses and they're more based on like medicine and stuff. So one of my courses that we have, the first hour, we have a lecturer come in and give us a talk about a certain disease. And then the second hour comes by and we have a patient that comes in and they talk about like their actual experience living with the disease and what their diagnostic was like. So that's very interesting to just kind of see that and have so much interaction with patients. We also have observerships where we get to go into the hospital and observe a clinic for a half day to see how that works. One of my other classes goes to the medical grand rounds that's held with the doctors of KGH, and you just kind of get to hear the talks that are given there. And then we also get the chance to have a discussion with the presenter afterwards. So I just was really interested, since I am thinking about potentially pursuing research or pursuing medicine. This program kind of like really gives me an in-depth understanding of both of those processes, and it will like basically delay me from making the decision until a little bit later.
I totally agree with Danielle and what you both said about being overwhelmed the number of choices you have for grad school and professional options. And also I agree with you, Cassandra, about talking about how I feel like nowadays it's no longer like there isn't like a linear route really to getting to where you want. Like there's so many different routes you can take to get where you want to be in life. Okay, so building off of that, I'm curious to hear about life outside of school. I feel like we're so lucky being at Queen's. We have so many options to get involved in extracurriculars as undergraduates. Are there any opportunities at Queen's for getting involved in extracurriculars as a grad student? And how feasible is it to get involved? What is the time commitment related to your programs?
Yeah, so there's still tons of opportunities to get involved. You'll see that the majority of them in grad school are going to be kind of like those student council positions, being like the representative for your program. And I think Cassandra is going to touch a little bit more on that, so I don't want to steal her thunder. But yeah, Cassandra and I are both serving as grad reps for Scientista right now. And I highly encourage, if there's anyone else listening and you run a club, open up a position for a grad rep. I think it's a great way to get your undergrad executive members in contact with somebody who can serve as a mentor for them and help them with their decisions. And it tends to be a little bit less of a time commitment of a position. You kind of just serve as a mentor and you serve as a connection to profs for events, to finding speakers. So I highly recommend anyone listening just open up a position on your exec team for a grad rep. It's an awesome, awesome opportunity. There's also, for specifically to my program, we're very involved with the Enrichment Studies unit. So this is something offered by Queen's for high school students where they get to come in for the summer and kind of take a university level course. So we serve as instructors for that initiative. And then there's also things like Girls System mentorship. I'm currently a mentor for them. They pair you up with a mentee from, again, high school who's interested in STEM. And you get to just kind of have meetings with them, listen to what they're going through, provide any kind of advice. And yeah, it's definitely still very feasible to be involved in things like this. I think at the end of the day, if it's serving you and it's serving your passions, then it's time well spent for sure. But I think it's also important, if you're feeling busy and you're feeling overwhelmed, to kind of learn how to say no to things as well. I think that can be just as valuable as saying yes to things as well. But yeah, in terms of my schedule, I currently have 2 days off, although my supervisor would kill me if I was saying that, because he is really adamant about the fact that they're not days off. I guess like when you're a graduate student, you really have to take any time that you have off to kind of look at your schedule and think of what you could be doing to advance your research, and you have to kind of take initiative in that sense. So and you also have to take into account just other responsibilities. When you're a grad student, you're getting a ton more emails than you did in your undergrad. So I've spent hours upon hours answering emails. I'm currently TAing as well, so grading takes up a lot of time. My program specifically, sometimes I have to give lectures, so preparing for lectures, creating slide sets takes up a lot of time, and then research in itself is a whole other animal. So I'm sure Cassandra can speak to that a little better than I can, because she might be a little bit more into her research than me.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. I mean, just like undergrad, your grad experience is going to be what you make of it. If you want to get involved and do a number of extracurriculars, you can. It's feasible. You can make it work. If you don't want to, like, you don't need to. So as Victoria mentioned, I am a member of the student council for my program. It kind of started up this year. So we have meetings once a week and we plan stuff for it. So there's a way to get involved with that. And something that's unique about the student council positions is they're a lot more integrated with the faculty. So as opposed to like the life sci student council, who is more just planning events, like I feel like we have a bigger role in a sense, and we get to do a little bit more things, which is really cool. There's also opportunities to be a TA, like Victoria mentioned. I personally decided not to do that this year just because I wanted to start out and see how busy I was and not take on too many things. But down the road, if I change my mind, I can always like apply and jump into that role later on. So yeah, it's busy, but it's also what you make of it. And if you want to do extracurriculars, there's definitely no problems making it work.
That's definitely reassuring to hear, because I know for myself, I do better once I get involved and I have other things to do outside of studying that's still productive and that I'm still passionate about. I know you guys touched on this a bit earlier, but how is your master's different than your undergrad? And are there any non-academic tips you wish you had known in your undergraduate years?
Yeah, so I think I'll keep this answer very brief, but I think the biggest difference when you enter your master's is that you're no longer like a little fish in a big pond. You're no longer just a number. So, in your undergrad, in a way, you're very independent in a sense, but definitely no one's eyes are on you. You're really just like one out of hundreds of students in an instructor's class. But once you get to grad school, you're in those very small classes. And I think that it's reassuring in the sense that you matter a little bit more, but it's a little bit more high stress, because definitely your supervisors are constantly like, over your shoulder, looking over you and hoping that you do well. They're definitely eager to see you succeed. So, lots of support there, but just a little bit more pressure. And then the number one, I think, academic tip that I can give is that really undergrad can be the best years of your life. So just try and make memories. Don't get too stressed out about just grades and stuff like that. I promise you that there's a way to kind of mitigate all of these things that you might think right now are the end of the world, but really 5 years from now, you'll look back and you'll think, oh, that made no difference in my life. But yeah, just make memories and enjoy the present, and try and be present in every moment and just, yeah, make the best of it.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. One of the major differences that I noticed coming into this was how independent a master's is. So starting off with your research project, it's my project and it's my responsibility. And if I'm not keeping on top of it and I'm not like knowing what's going on and like thinking of what to do next, like nobody's gonna do that for me. Like don't get me wrong, I have my supervisor there, and he's there to ask questions. He's there to help me. Like, he's amazing, and it's great. Like, I bounce ideas off, he bounces ideas off, but at the same time, if I'm not willing to put in the time to push it forward and to be invested in it, he's not going to force me and be on me like, hey, Cassandra, did you do this yet? Hey, Cassandra, did you do this? Hey, Cassandra, this is coming up. So it's something that you kind of just need to stay on top of yourself. There's a lot less deadlines. Like in undergrad, you'll like need to go through the modules because you have a test coming up. Whereas for me, it's like, I need to do reading so I can understand my project, but I can do them whenever. I just need to do them. So that's something that's a bit of a change, is just being on top of yourself and making sure that you're staying on top of what you need to do and still investing into your research, even though no one's like forcing you to do it. Something else that I would say, like Victoria said, like your voice matters more. Like what you need to say is important. And in a sense, that matters more than the grade that you get on an assignment. Grad school is very much not about grades as much as it is about like what you can do and what you can succeed in and what you can provide. Like I have a bunch of assignments that are due, and we're not doing them to get a 4.0 GPA anymore. You're doing it to get feedback and to improve your research and to improve who you are. So it's just something that's like the priorities, I guess, are switched from getting good grades to just like succeeding and thriving in your research and doing.
That's so reassuring to hear that in grad school you're more than just a number, because it definitely feels that way sometimes in undergrad. Going back to the process of applying to grad school, where did you both find your references and how did you approach them in the first place?
So, I wanted to say that, references can really come from the most unlikely places. Like, this is where it's really important to get involved because you never know. Really, something that you think, like, oh, should I do this? Should I not? Can really be the best experience and can expose you to so many different people who you can end up building a really good relationship with and can serve as an amazing reference for your application. So it's really important to branch out sometimes. For example, one of my references was a language professor that I TA'd for. And I think it really distinguished me from other applicants because I kind of was able to showcase that I really love teaching, not just in STEM, but even in languages. So I would say, when trying to find references, just try and get involved in things that you're really passionate about, because that'll shine through, and then you'll make really good connections with people who are also passionate about those same things, and they'll be able to advocate for why you're such a good candidate, and they'll be more than willing to help you. You'd be surprised how willing profs are to provide reference for students.
Yeah, so for me, one of the references that I chose was my fourth year project supervisor. So that was a nice one because he knew me as a thesis student in his fourth year, so he could kind of speak to my character and my research abilities. Something that someone asked me the other day about that, though, was did I find it weird asking him to be my reference, even though I was like not choosing to stay in his lab? And I don't think that's something that you have to worry about, is if you have a professor and you want them to be a reference, but you're like for something else, because as they want you to succeed, and it's not you leaving them, it's you choosing a different opportunity that will help better yourself. So it's not personal, and they get that. They have students coming in every year. So I don't think you'd ever need to be worried about asking someone for a reference that they would get offended, let's say, that you're leaving them and choosing to better yourself by taking this other opportunity. So I don't think that that's something that ever came across my mind when I asked my supervisor for that, and I don't think many people would be worried about that. And so my program needed two references. So I had my fourth year supervisor who really knew who my character and knew me as a project student, and I didn't really have any other professors that I was super close to. So I had a bit of trouble thinking of who I wanted to choose. But there was this one professor whose lab was on the same floor as my lab was. I had taken his course in third year, and it was just something that I saw him like once a day, walked by him and would say, "Good morning, how's it going?" So I just reached out to him and was like, "I took your course last year. I was really interested in it. You see me on the floor. This is what I want to do. I'm applying to this program. This is what I'm doing now." Kind of gave him a little bit of info of who I was. I provided my transcript and a resume just so he could have a little bit of like background of what to go off of, and just asked, like, I need another reference. Like, would you be willing to give it to me? And no hesitation was like, yeah, I would love to. Sometimes they'll follow up with like, is there anything you'd like me to highlight in your reference letter, or can you provide this for me, just so they can get to know you a little bit better. But I feel like it's best to have someone who knows you, but if you don't have someone, there are ways that you can find someone.
I love that story, Cassandra. And in general, and I guess also specific to both of your stories, what types of people would you say would be the best references for your type of program?
Yeah, so like I said, both of my references were profs that could kind of speak to my passion for teaching because I TA'd for both of their courses. And I strategically chose them because of the nature of my program and its focus in teaching. But I think that as long as you choose somebody who kind of knows who you are on a little bit of a deeper level and is able to add like a second dimension rather than just saying, oh, you know, Victoria's a fantastic student, if they can really advocate for you and add that second dimension to your reference letter, then that's great. And like Cassandra said, a lot of times profs will follow up and kind of ask you if there's anything specific that that you want them to include in the letter, and you can kind of guide them in the sense and remind them of maybe some of the things that you've done for them in the past, or some of the qualities that you've displayed, and you can kind of be involved in creating that letter with them in some instances. But for the most part, profs will do an amazing job, you know, representing you and showcasing kind of your qualities.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't have too much to add to that. I didn't specifically choose my references thinking about the program in mind. I chose them based on who I thought knew me as more than just an email and a name, asking them questions about the course, but people who could kind of put a face to the name and kind of speak a bit to my character. So I think it's just if you have someone who knows you a little bit deeper and can speak to your character, so it is a bit more of a genuine reference letter. And if you don't, again, people will ask follow-up questions and ask for more advice. There's no problem in finding references that way, but if you can find someone that can give you a more genuine reference letter, I feel like that would be the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I definitely find the application process a little intimidating. Just out of curiosity, Victoria, did you have any backup plans if you didn't get into your program of choice, and did you apply to any other programs?
Yeah, this is a great question. I love it when people ask me this. Yeah, I know a lot of people are kind of in the position where they can't decide what program to apply for. But I guess I was lucky in the sense that I was really sure I just wanted to do this one program. So really it was maybe a little risky in that sense as well. I really didn't have a backup plan, and I think I made peace with the fact that if I didn't get in, I was just going to take the year off, maybe travel, maybe look for work in the field, and I was totally okay with that. I think I needed just a break from school. But then again, if I had gotten into the program, then I would be happy to, you know, take the next step in my life. And I think that people get really anxious about like failing to get in somewhere. But it doesn't have to be the end of the world. I think that, you know, taking a year off can be really refreshing. It can clear your mind, and it can even open new doors and kind of put you on the right track. So if you're feeling indecisive about, you know, what program you want to be in, I would recommend taking a year off. Or if you want to try a couple of different programs, and, you know, no harm, no foul. If it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen another year, or it might be for the best, and you might end up on a better path if you're doing something else. So who knows? I think you just kind of got to roll with the punches, and that was my plan.
Yeah, I find, especially our generation, we're really into the hustle culture and everyone's scared to take a year off. So I really like what you said about that. Cassandra, were you just as sure about your program, or did you apply to any backups as well?
Yeah, so I'm someone who likes to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, and honestly, even more if I need to. So I definitely knew that this was the program that I wanted, but I didn't actually end up going through with the application because it was due a little bit later than the first one. So by the time I was about to hit submit, I had heard back from the program that I wanted to and was able to accept it. But I was going through the process of contacting other supervisors and kind of like keeping my options open of like, okay, I'm interested in this, but I'm also interested, just because I was worried that if I didn't get into this one program, I didn't want to fall back upon nothing, because at the time, I wasn't ready to take a year off. I think if it came down to it, I still would have grown and figured it out, and it wouldn't have been the worst thing ever. But at the time, I really wanted to do something after undergrad. So I did kind of like look around and contact other people. I also went about it earlier than most people do, because I remember when I started meeting with profs, they're like, "Oh wow, you're a little early this year." So just for me, I like to plan ahead. So I did definitely talk to a number of different individuals and different professors about potentially doing research in their lab.
Sorry, just a follow-up question for you, Cassandra. So what was early for you? When did you start reaching out to profs and looking into different programs?
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of started meeting with profs, and this is like informally meeting with them, just saying, "Hey, I'm interested in the program. I'm interested in your research," kind of like before Christmas. So like late November, early December, like right before it got super busy with exams, just because for me, I wanted to kind of know a little bit more before going into the Christmas break so that I could use those 2 weeks to kind of think about it a bit more. And the professors I met with were really great. They talked to me about the program, but a lot of times it was, okay, I can't give you an answer if I'm going to take a student yet because it's a bit early. I don't know if I have funding yet. I haven't met any other candidates, but they were like super nice. They're like, think about it, come back in January if you're still interested and we can talk again. So I don't think that reaching out too early is a bad thing, because for me, I never got turned away saying like, please don't contact me right now. It just gave me the chance to learn more. It was just, I can't give you an answer right now. Come back if you're still interested. So I don't think there's any right time to go about meeting someone. Just for me, that was when I did it.
For sure, thank you. Yeah, I know for at least me personally, figuring out the whole timeline of when do I start researching programs, when do I start talking to professors, and when do I start to narrow down my program choices is really overwhelming, and just figuring out what early looks like and what late looks like just gets really confusing. So that was really helpful. Thank you. Also going back to the process of applying, what are the GPA requirements for your program? And do you think there are other competencies that are especially important and that also made you stand out?
Yeah, so for my program requires around a B plus average from second to fourth year, I think. But there is a spot on the application where you can kind of explain any extenuating circumstances that might have changed your GPA or might have affected your grade in a specific course. And I found it interesting that there was also an interview question during my interview process, which I know not every master's program requires an interview, but mine did. And the question was whether I thought that my grades were an accurate reflection of my performance as a student. So there's definitely a lot of room to kind of expand on your thoughts there, and just reframe kind of anything you might categorize as a failure as a learning experience, and really turn it around and put shed a positive light on it. But I think absolutely, like, there's so many more competencies that are a lot more important than your GPA. Like as Cassandra and I have alluded to, grades don't really matter anymore in a master's, and you're really just looking to learn and better yourself as an individual. So I think if you can display professionalism, communication skills, and advocate for yourself, so self-advocacy, drive, passion, I think that's way more important than some nitty-gritty little number, you know? And I think that's where things like your references and your personal statement, as well as your CV, are going to come in, because those are the places where you have the opportunity to kind of say something about yourself that makes you stand out from others and really self-advocate about, you know, what makes you unique and what makes you a good candidate.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with everything you said. So for my program, there isn't a published GPA that is like a cutoff of what you need. So I'm not actually sure like what the average GPA of people that usually get accepted is. So not too helpful with that part of the question. But again, like Victoria said, I think it's just kind of like knowing what your strengths are. And I think the personal statement in the application really is helpful for this, because you get to make it what you want. One thing I would suggest is looking at the program's goals, looking at like what the program is and kind of basing your personal statement off of this. Because if you're going into a research-based program, you want to at least talk about your interest in research in your personal statement, as opposed to if you're going into more of a teaching-based program like Victoria's, you would want to talk more about your interest in teaching and the experiences that you have through that. So I feel like as hard as it is to say like you're more than just your GPA, you really are, and like you really need to use your personal statement just to highlight everything else that you have to offer, because there is so much more to you than just your GPA, and like that's really what makes you stand out as a candidate.
I think that's really insightful, because I know applying to undergrad, you're just your grades, right? So no one's really had experience writing a CV or like writing your personal statement. So I think that just perpetuates the idea throughout undergrad that you are just your GPA. But going on a different note, one of the most common questions we got was how to navigate the process of applying for funding. How do you apply for CIHR funding that are due in December, but you don't know which lab you're going into yet?
Okay, so applying for CIHR funding requires that you do know what lab you're going into, and it also requires that you know what project you're going to be taking on, because you're going to need to submit a proposal to get this funding. And this is something that I kind of freaked myself out about. I didn't really know too much about it, so I started looking into it, and I was like, oh no, I don't know any of these things. Like, how am I possibly going to get this funding? But I think then again, it's all about kind of talking to the students in your prospective program and ask them, you know, whether it was necessary, whether they did it. Talk to the profs, and you'll find that a lot of the times, I think it's more something that PhD students look into acquiring, but not very common in a master's. Of course, if schools know that you come with a certain amount of funding attached to you, it makes you a little bit more of an attractive candidate. But you'll find again that it's not super common for master's students. But then again, you know, I did want to reassure everyone that funding can be obtained from other sources. So there's plenty of opportunities to make money TAing. There's also a graduate student stipend that's allotted to each department. So that's kind of, for somebody who doesn't know, it's more of like an allowance for grad students that's given out to kind of help cover the costs of tuition and living expenses.
Yeah, so I would say that applying for funding isn't necessary to do your master's. You definitely don't need to have applied for it beforehand, but if you want to, like, you shouldn't feel held back, like you can't. The December 1st deadline for that application is hard because a lot of times you don't know what supervisor you're going to have, but most research-based master's programs are 2 years long, so you can apply for it. Like, I'm in my first year of my master's and I'm applying for it now. So you can apply for it to get the funding for your second year. It's not like you only have it at the first time before you go in and that's it. You can apply for funding throughout your master's as well. So there are other deadlines, especially like internal awards that are more specific to like your area of research. Another thing that you can do is if you have a potential supervisor in mind, you can just talk to them and say, look, I know that you haven't chosen me as your student. However, I'm interested in applying for funding. Can I use your name and your lab's work as a potential project, and kind of just like a draft of it? Because a lot of times the proposals that you do have to write for it aren't super in depth, where you need to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, because research changes like every day. You get a finding and you have to completely switch up your whole hypothesis. So it's more of just an outline of what you're going to do. And if you are serious about it, that shows to a professor too that you are serious about doing a master's. And if they really don't want you to, they'll just say no. But in the sense, if you word it like, I know that you haven't chosen somewhere, however, I want to apply for this, could I use your name? Likely you're going to find some people that will say yes. And then something else that I've heard about funding, and I'm not sure if I'm going to word this 100% correctly, so don't quote me on it, but if you happen to be successful in applying for funding, and let's say you applied for the lab that you did your 4th year project in, and then you end up switching into a new lab, the funding is your funding, it's not the lab funding. So as long as you still qualify within the like guidelines, so like you, if it's a health-based research, you need to be doing like health-based. You can't switch into like physics research. So as long as you kind of like qualify within the guidelines of the funding, there are circumstances that you can like keep your funding even if you like aren't doing this exact project that you said. Again, I'm not 100% sure how that works, so if that's something you're thinking of doing, I would ask someone who knows a little bit more about that instead of just going on my word. But again, like your application is just a proposal, so it's not like the final draft of it. So hopefully that helps ease your worries. But again, funding is not the be all end all, and if you can't apply for it beforehand, you can still find a placement for your master's.
I did also just want to add that there is a section in the Queen's School of Graduate Studies application that asks whether you're pursuing funding. And I think just being able to say whether you're pursuing this kind of funding or a scholarship or any kind of other funding, being able to say yes, I think kind of shows that you're serious, again, like Sandra said, about pursuing a master's, and you're looking into ways that's going to make it feasible for you. So that's something to consider. And this can be as simple as, you know, applying for a scholarship outside of the school that you heard about online that maybe you're eligible for because you're in STEM or because you're a woman, or any kind of opportunities like that. So definitely try and look into and find something that works for you. It's gonna benefit you in the long run anyways. It'll take some of the financial stress off of things, and it'll make your application just look that much better.
That was really reassuring to hear. Thank you both so much. We also received many questions about the process of finding a supervisor. How early should you reach out to a supervisor?
Okay, so Cassandra is definitely going to be the better person to answer this question, but for my program and anyone who's interested in my program, the process of finding a supervisor is a little bit different. So we're encouraged not to look for a supervisor until we've been accepted into our program and until we've completed our orientation. And this is because we do a mini research project. So our mini thesis has, you know, different requirements than a traditional research master's does. So our internal supervisors want to make sure that we understand those requirements and we're conveying them well to our external supervisors in order for them to understand that our program is 16 months long. It's not 2 years. So we're not going to have time to do that much of an in-depth research project as a traditional master's student would. So that's where the difference lies in my program, but I'm sure Cassandra has a lot more to share about that than I do.
Yeah, so again, I would say that there's no one right way to go about doing this, kind of whatever works best for you. But for my program, so you have to get accepted into the program itself. And then when you get accepted on the condition that you can find a supervisor. And so then you also have to find a supervisor. So there's two kind of like components to that. And you can get accepted to the program before you find a supervisor and then have to find a supervisor after. Or you could find a supervisor who's like, if you get into the program, I will take you in your lab, or you can kind of have it happening at the same time. So for me, I kind of had it happening at the same time. I had reached out to a couple different supervisors that were in the program, met with them, and then I kind of found for myself which one of them I liked the best. So again, I reached out to them late November, early December, had an initial meeting just to kind of hear a bit about what they did, see if I was interested in hear about the program as well. And then for the one who I was most interested after that initial meeting, I reached out again in middle of January, because applications for my program were due near the beginning of February. So about a month before it was due, just kind of saying, hi, remember me, I met with you in December. I'm still really interested in your lab and the work that you're doing. I'd love to like continue this talk and take it a step further to talk about potentially joining your lab and seeing where your thoughts are at. And so I met with that supervisor again in January, and they were like, thank you, like I'm interested. And he was like, you have to get accepted into the program, so I can't say yes or no right now. Like he's like, I'm not saying no because I don't like you, it's just I want to wait, which was super fair. And you might have that, so you might go into it. And that was kind of why I wanted to have a backup plan, because I didn't know if he was going to go with another student or if it would work out. So I submitted my application, but from the process of meeting with him and talking to him a little bit about it, there's a spot on the application when you can mention if you've reached out to anyone from the faculty. So in my meetings with him, he was like, I can't give you an answer right now, but if you want, you can put my name down on your application that you've met with me and we've talked about it. So one of the pros to talking with someone or finding a supervisor beforehand is that they can help support your application. So that kind of helps boost the part of getting into the program, because if you have a supervisor who wants you and who's willing to take you, when the application comes to like the board for the program, that person will be there to be like, oh yeah, that's a good candidate. So it will help your application out a little bit as well. Hopefully that helped answer the question.
That definitely does. Thank you so much. How do you go about contacting a supervisor if you don't actually have any actual research experience or a lot of course experience in a specific field, but have recently developed an interest in it?
Yeah, so just when you go about contacting a supervisor, I would say just send a very brief email. Remember that these people are very busy, so try and make your outline and your overview of kind of why you're getting in contact very brief. Definitely attach your resume. Try and make it very, again, clear and succinct. Keep it to one page. And then I think when it comes to not having too much experience, as long as you show enthusiasm and passion for the subject, and again, just like a willingness to learn, that will really go a long way.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Victoria. I think one thing to remember that isn't always like well spoken about when applying for a master's, I feel like it's more important to have an interest in the subject than it is to have experience. Like a lot of supervisors don't really mind if you come into it with no lab experience, as long as you have the desire to learn and the interest in what they're doing and wanting to be a part of it, they're willing to teach you it. So experience is a benefit and it will definitely help your application, but it's not a necessity. So just be honest with them, tell them why you're interested about it, do a little bit of background reading so that you have some knowledge to back up the interest, and it's not just a random email, but actually a well thought out email that is personalized to them. Because I feel like the worst thing to do would just be to send the same email to like 20 different people and just change the name on it, because they can tell that that's a generalized email. So just showing interest and just letting them know that what you want this is super important.
So once you've gone about contacting a supervisor, what qualities should you look for in one, since you'll be spending a lot of time working closely with them in the next coming months?
Yeah, so I've got a team of really great supervisors right now, and I think that as hard as it is to kind of tell right off the bat, just try and look for someone who is attentive, who has some kind of schedule where they're meeting with the students that they supervise, every 2 weeks or so, just to kind of check in on your progress frequently. And also someone who just provides constructive criticism and gets you thinking outside the box, because these are the people that are gonna, as scary as it is sometimes to be put on the spot, these are the people that are going to really get you to that next level and make you learn a lot from what you're doing and your mistakes sometimes even, to just get you kind of thinking in a different way can be really valuable. So yeah, that's the advice that I have. Cassandra?
Yeah, one thing that's kind of unique about having a supervisor is it's someone who's like pretty high up in their field that's you're working with basically one-on-one really, really closely with. So you want someone who's going to be supportive of you and that will help you beyond just the project, that can help you afterwards and will help you progress towards your goals. And like, you want to be able to have the open conversation with them, that it's like, this is what I'm striving for, even if it's not like a position in their lab long term, even if it's like, I want this to help me do this. You just want someone who knows your goals and is willing to help you get there. And I think an important way to go about doing that is try to find people from their lab or their past students that you can talk to, because for an interview you put on your best version of yourself, but so does your supervisor. So you might not always get the full story just from like one 20-minute interview where you first meet them. So talking to their students definitely helps to get the full picture. And then another thing I would say is just go with your gut. Like, that's what I did. I met with a number of different supervisors for like 30 minutes. And after that, there was one supervisor that I just, for some reason, was really drawn to that lab. And that was the one that I tried to pursue and tried to get into their lab. And so at the end of the day, you just kind of have to take a leap of faith and hope that your research that you've done, talking to people, really works out, and just trust yourself that you're making the right decision.
That's a really good point you made, Cassandra. Going off of that, how can our listeners politely ask to be put in contact with the supervisor's current grad students, and what types of questions should they ask?
Okay, so I would say definitely just ask. It's not a bad thing to ask at all. Definitely ask politely, but I think it actually shows that you're making an effort to make sure that the program is the right fit for you. So I think people really focus on trying to display that they're the right fit for the program, but they forget that it's just as important to convey kind of a commitment and certainty that this program is also the right fit for you. So current students like myself and Cassandra are really always eager to help, and you can really ask them anything. They'll be honest with you and they'll give you the inside scoop, which can really help you make your decision process a little bit easier. But I think, again, it's just really important to, go both ways and just make sure that not only are you the right fit for the program and you're trying to, of course, prove and convey that to your prospective supervisor, but you're also conveying to them that you're sure that this is what you want to do and you're really eager, and you know that this aligns well with your goals.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't think you should ever be nervous to ask, because everyone does it, so you're not the first person to ask for that. And a lot of times the person you're meeting with might even mention it beforehand. They might offer to put you in contact with someone before you even have to bring it up, because it is something that happens quite often. So you shouldn't feel nervous about asking that at all. One of my favorite questions that I asked when I met with students from the proposed programs that I was applying to is just, what was something that they wish they knew before starting? And that kind of opens it up for them to answer it however they want, if it's about the program, if it's about the supervisor. But I find that kind of just helps, because then you get a bunch of stuff where it's like, oh, I never thought about that going into it. So I think my questions, I would usually ask what's something they wish they knew, and then just how was the transition and how supportive was the supervisor during that transition. Like, you want to know, is it expected that they explain it to you once and then you should never make a mistake on it, or is it something that you can go and ask questions about and ask for help, and are they going to be lenient? And everyone has their own preferences in that, but that's just a good way to kind of know what you're getting yourself into and what it's going to be like right at the start.
I totally agree with both of you. I feel like when I go on Twitter, when I hear about like other master's students and PhD students, they always talk about how one of the most important parts of the application process is reaching out to graduate students and really finding out what the environment at the lab is like, what the supervision style of the supervisor is like, because there's only so much you can really find out about the lab and the supervisor from a 30-minute interview. So I'm really glad you both touched on that. A question for Kassandra. How did you know that you wanted to be in the specific lab that you're in right now for your master's?
So again, part of it was honestly a gut feeling that I just liked the interview. I felt like it was a place that I could fit in and it felt like a place that I wanted to be. And I just kind of had to trust that gut feeling that it was going to work out. The reason I reached out to this supervisor was because the research I did in my 4th year thesis project was kind of related to the research that I'm doing now. Like there's a link between those. So I liked that I wouldn't be starting like over from scratch, because a lot of other supervisors that I was talking with, I didn't really have much background information. So I liked that I'd be going into it with like a little bit of previous knowledge that I could build upon, as opposed to starting from scratch. And I was also still really interested in reproduction and development and wanted to continue doing work like in that field. I'm not in that field, but I'm still kind of like relating it back to that. So it was just something that it just kind of worked out that I liked the work he was doing. It was stuff that I was interested in. I thought I already kind of like knew a little bit, so I wouldn't be going in like just out of nowhere. And then again, like meeting with the supervisor, just like got a really good feeling after the meeting. I was just like really excited. I thought it went really well. I liked meeting with him, and it was just a gut feeling. And I don't really know how else to describe it other than just like trusting your instincts after that, being like, yeah, that went well. And then I guess just a final point of knowing that I wanted to be in that lab is because then once you talk to people, whether that's people from their lab or just people in and around the department, like, oh, who are you thinking of going with? And you tell them their name of your supervisor and like, that's a great supervisor. They're so attentive to their students. And just like the reputation of my supervisor is so highly respected that it was just really, really just like pushed me to want to be there more, just because of how respected he is and how highly everyone speaks of him.
That's amazing. How did you find out that you first liked research, and did your 499 secure that for you?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's, if you're debating between the major and the life science specialization and you're not too sure, like I am 100% supportive of the specialization, because that did secure that I was interested in research for me. Like I didn't have any summer positions beforehand that allowed me to do research. I just did like camp jobs and stuff like that regular students do, nothing too spectacular. So the 499 was a chance for me to kind of just see, and it's something that I don't want to say like doing a master's if you're unsure, but like even if I didn't like research, doing a 499 wouldn't have been a waste, because it was 1 year of my life. It was part of my course. I got a grade for it. I got my degree. And if I came out of that saying, yeah, you know what, research isn't for me, that would have been huge, because now I know that like I don't want to do a master's, or I didn't want to do this, and I wouldn't spend the next 2 years of my life doing a research-based program if I hated it. So it is something that I really, really enjoyed, and I think it really helped me decide that like, yeah, I don't hate research. I'm not ready to commit to it for the rest of my life, but I'm ready to explore it more thoroughly and just see different aspects of it. And yeah, for sure the 499 helped that for me.
I think that's so important. I feel like sometimes when things don't work out for us, if we have a bad experience in a position or doing a 499 or in a club, we get so hung up over not liking it or it not being for us. But I think realizing that something isn't for you is just as valuable as realizing something is for you, and is such an important aspect of self-discovery. So I'm really glad that you talked about that. You both come across as very composed and confident. What is the first step in believing in yourself and overcoming your own deeply internalized feelings of inadequacy?
All right, so I could go off on this. I love answering questions like this, but I think the first step to obtaining confidence is to understand that literally everyone around you is feeling the exact same way that you are. It just makes me sad that, in our generation, lack of confidence is really super common. And I think that everyone feels inadequate and everyone is worried about their future, but just like you think you're the only one going through it, the person next to you also, thinks that they're the only one going through it. And just like you think they have everything together and they're so composed and so confident, they probably think the exact same thing about you. So my best advice, honestly, as simple as it is just fake it till you make it. Confidence is really, really rare these days. And I think if you can push yourself to display even a tiny little shred of it, then that's going to go a really long way. And that's going to make you stand out tremendously from other candidates. So, next time you're in class and you see that no one's participating in a discussion or no one's raising their hand to answer a question, try and push yourself to kind of be the first one to do that. I bet you that'll make you stand out, tremendously in front of that prof who's teaching the class, and he'll be really appreciative that one of his students is taking the interest and the time to step out of their comfort zone and speak up, And I think that the more you see the results of this, the more confident you're going to become. So eventually you're not going to be faking it anymore. You're actually going to be confident, which is great. But, also realize that you're the only one that is as unique as you are, and nobody else is like that. So really, I think that people should place more value on their uniqueness. Every opportunity and every skill that you have makes you different than everyone else, and I think that's really important to kind of convey in a grad school application. And finally, the last thing I wanted to say is that grad school gives you the opportunity to start fresh, and I think that's a real gift because you start off with this blank canvas, and the admissions office and your prospective supervisor really don't know who you are. So it's kind of up to you to just paint the picture of who you are, and you can do that in any way that you want. And I think, like Sarah said, it's so important to know how to shape failures or opportunities where you've just discovered something isn't for you as learning experiences, and I think that can be super valuable. So just kind of take ownership of who you are and have fun kind of painting that picture for other people and introducing them to how wonderful you are, because you really are wonderful. And that's all I really have to say about that. But yeah, confidence is rare, and I wish it on everyone. I really do. It's something that absolutely is feasible for everyone to work on, and it can really go a long way.
So I agree with everything you said, Victoria. Thank you. That was great. But one thing I do want to touch upon is that I feel like sometimes people just get sucked into the Queen's bubble, and whether that's for lifestyle or whatever program you're in, you just feel like you're one of many because there's 400 other kids in your program. But you have to remember that you got into Queen's University, you got into this program, you're here, you're succeeding, you're not failing. Like, that is such an achievement, and eventually you're going to get to put that on your resume that you're a graduate of Queen's University, and that's going to put you ahead of so many people for having that degree, because it is something that's highly upon. So even at times, if you feel like you're just one of many people in the program, you have to remember that you're not, and what you have to offer from being here is huge. And on top of that, you have extracurriculars and your beliefs and your interests and everything that you can add to that. So it's just hard to think of yourself as a strong candidate sometimes because nobody really thinks of themselves that way, but you just have to take a step back and try and portray that onto someone else. Like, if this was my friend and they were doing this and this, like, you would be so impressed by them, and you just kind of have to think about yourself in that way as well. So it is hard to be confident, and I feel like for me, taking the master's has definitely helped because I have more of my own voice now and talking about my own work. I have smaller classes that allow me to speak up more, and it just gives me a stronger sense of who I am as a person and what I want. And it's definitely helped me to kind of realize that I am a strong candidate and I'm here in this program doing what I'm interested in, and not everyone can do that. So that is what makes me special. And you just kind of have to find what that is for you and own it. Honestly, just whatever it is, own it.
Yeah, that's so important. I think confidence also comes with age. I know I realized, especially in my later years of undergrad, that I'm so much more than just another Queen student. Like, my relationships shape me, my interests shape me, and I think that's helped with my confidence. And also, just like Victoria said, you have to fake it till you make it. A lot of times I'm not confident in class at all, but I have to push myself to participate and just give myself that edge. But to conclude, are there any career aspirations or goals you're currently working on? And how does your current program prepare you for this?
All right. So right now, I definitely see myself teaching. If you guys haven't gotten that already, I feel like I've harped on it a lot, but that might very well change. Like, I'm so open to the fact that, I might love this now and like discover something that I love even more tomorrow. But of course, my program is preparing me very well for this because it is so focused in teaching. So that's something that, I'm going to be able to add to my resume, and I'm going to come out of this with one of my deliverables is actually a teaching dossier. So that'll be wonderful for my career. But I think I'm also just trying my best right now to live in the moment and make the most of the opportunities that I'm getting. And we'll just see where life takes me. I don't want to dwell too much on the future. I think a common theme of everything that we talked about today is that, like Danielle said, once you get older, I think you kind of develop that confidence, and you also realize that life just has a way of working itself out. If you think about where you were 5 years ago, I'm sure you were nervous as to like, am I going to get into university, or like, what's happening? Like, what am I interested in? What is my major going to be? And now everything is okay. So you can apply that same logic to like 5 years in the future. You're making a big deal about these things now, but life really has a way of working itself out. And I think every experience that we're living right now is shaping our future. And that's really exciting because we can kind of take control of that and take ownership of that right now. So let's just all live in the moment.
Yeah, that was great, Victoria. Thanks. So one of my goals that I'm not super set on, but I think I'm leaning toward is I think I am interested in a career in medicine. So that's something I'm thinking of pursuing after I finish up with my master's. And so something that I think my current program helps me prepare for is just seeing the ins and outs. Like, I get to have discussions with a bunch of different clinician scientists, a bunch of different physicians, and they talk to us about their career paths, and just seeing like some people came out of undergrad, some people did a PhD and then went to med school, someone did a business degree, started as an accountant, and then was like, yeah, I'm gonna switch it up. So just seeing all of the different paths that people take to get there is super reassuring, that like, just because you haven't decided or aren't doing the typical path right away, like, you can get there if you really want to. And then just another thing that helps out is because you now have more of a like direct role with professors and talking to them in a discussion sense, you have people that you can lean on for support and people that you can network with, that you can talk to more intimately than you can with just like an undergraduate professor, because they have 400 students, whereas now you're one of 10 maybe in a class, or you're just one-on-one with your supervisor. You can definitely rely on them more for help, for networking, and for next steps, and let them know what you want and how best to get there. So I feel like it's going to be a lot of asking for help and asking for advice, but I feel like it will help me get where I want to be.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you both so much for your time. This was such an insightful conversation. I think Danielle and I both learned so much. On behalf of the Queen Scientista executive team, good luck in your future endeavors in STEM.
Thank you so much for having us. I really enjoyed coming on here and speaking with you guys. I hope that Victoria and I gave you a better insight into our programs and what our experiences of graduate studies have been so far. I just wanted to mention that Victoria and I will be opening up office hours starting in the new year, and this is kind of a chance to ask informal questions, or if anything just pops up, we'll both be online and able to answer some more specific questions that you may have about graduate studies. And on top of that, if you have any initial comments after this video, we will be looking through the Facebook and Instagram comment section, and we'd be happy to to answer any questions that you guys may have. So hopefully we helped give you some advice, and thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to Sarah and Danielle for hosting this wonderful initiative and having us on.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone tuning in.